Okay, so as usual the conversation will be in English, but a short introduction will be in Italian. Michael Rakowitz è stato l'ospite di un'importante retrospettiva nel 2019 che ho avuto il piacere anche di curare insieme al direttore del museo, Carolyn Cristo Bacargile. È artista, insegnante, a volte chef, also chef, you are. E you're a cook, un cuoco, giusto. Ed è un artista americano di origini ebraico-irachene, noto soprattutto per progetti concettuali o relazionali che spesso realizza in ambienti che sono non i contesti tradizionali di musei e gallerie. Partendo dalla storia dell'architettura, dell'archeologia, della storia contemporanea, esplora nelle sue opere l'esperienza della diaspora, i grandi temi della contemporaneità, delle guerre, ahimè, e anche della povertà nelle grandi metropoli. L'opera che presentiamo qui al Castello di Rivoli è The Ballad of Special Ops Cody del 2017, è un video che l'artista ha anche regalato, ha donato al museo ed è entrato a far parte della collezione del Castello di Rivoli. L'opera è un video realizzato con la tecnica dell'animazione in stop motion ed è girato all'Oriental Institute dell'Università di Chicago, città dove Michael vive con la sua famiglia. Il video riprende il movimento di una bambola giocattolo con le sembianze di un soldato americano che cerca di comunicare con le statuette dell'area della Mesopotamia che sono all'interno del museo. Rakowitz ha un aneddoto su questo, cioè racconta che durante un viaggio da New York a Baltimora, all'epoca dove studiava, si imbatte nella copertina di un New York Daily News che ha la fotografia di un gruppo militante islamico che è di un soldato americano, John Adams, this is the story about, tenuto in ostaggio e minacciato di morte se entro 72 ore i prigionieri nelle carceri americane e prigionieri iracheni non fossero stati liberati. Insomma, 24 ore dopo la pubblicazione di questa foto emerge che John Adams non è un essere umano, ma è un pupazzo, un Special Ops Cody, un giocattolo prodotto dalla Dragon Model e che è in vendita nelle basi americane dell'Iraq e del Kuwait e che viene inviato dai militari ai propri figli come in assenza della loro presenza. Per cui in questo video vediamo questa bambola con attrezzature militari arrampicarsi sulle teche fino a ritrovarsi davanti a una statuetta e chiedergli perdono per le azioni commesse. So, Michael, thank you again for your patience for this brief introduction. So, your personal story, you are Iraqi Jewish from origin, are very often the narrative background of much of your work. Can you tell us where you come from and what role migration and exodus have in your practice?
Interesting question to start with. One of the people that I studied with at graduate school, the artist Krzysztof Wodiczko, would always say that the question is not where are you from, it's where are you from? Because we do hold so many of these different identities, and so it becomes very complex in my family's history to be talking about, like, where do I come from? My father's family comes from Eastern Europe originally. They were already 2 generations in America by the time my father was born. He came from Eastern European Jewish ancestry. And then my mother's family, whose house I was raised in, are from Baghdad. And they were Jews that lived there in a very old community of Jewish people in Iraq that goes back thousands and thousands of years. And they had to leave in 1941 after an event called the Farhud, which was this violent dispossession of the Jewish citizens of Iraq, and it happened in places like Baghdad, it happened in places like Basra, and it was heartbreaking for my grandparents because they felt very Iraqi, you know, and they actually identified not just as Babylonian Jews or Baghdadi Jews, but as Arab Jews. So they felt very much part of that world. And what they did is when they came to the States, they made sure that that house that my mother was raised in and that we were raised in was like a portal to that place that they couldn't go to anymore. So I always talk about how my grandparents were like the first installation artists I ever met, because everything that was on the floor was from Iraq, and what was on the walls was from Iraq, what was coming out of the stereo was from Iraq, and what was coming out of the kitchen was most definitely from Iraq. You know, so all of that kind of contributes to an identity that I can only say, like, you know, it's best to describe me as Baharat, which is the Iraqi spice mix, but it just mixes all these things together, like cinnamon, allspice, rose petals, you know, cumin, all of it, yeah.
And so art help you to explore this identity theme and so also cultural complexity.
Yes, I think, you know, growing up in New York, my parents frequently took us to museums and always introduced us to, you know, the symbolic realm of human history, which always involved art or songs or stories. And it became a very easy thing for me to become attracted to at an early age. And so it is a great place to explore these things, because there's also, in art, there's no rules, you know, and a world that always imposes rules on who you can say you are, you know, to have my grandparents be told that they couldn't be Iraqi anymore, my grandparents found a way of still retaining that, you know, by having a kind of independent relationship to those things that could also cause them pain to remember, but it was dear to them. So art is one of those places that I think, you know, we don't need to always be so clinical and scientific and violently political. We can be all these things, and there can be an endless amount of hyphens.
After the American invasion of Iraq in 2003, you began to explore even more deeply the Iraqi culture and the risk of devastation of cultural heritage that happens in war times. This experience brought you to the practice also of reenactment. I'm referring to the restaging of your grandfather company, Davidson and Co. in the work Return, but also the project The Invisible Enemy Should Not Exist, that consists of the life-size reconstruction of archaeological manufacts. So it is possible to rebuild what is destroyed. This is a kind of philosophical question, but I quote you. And how important is the act of recomposing? You said once, scars need to stay visible.
Yes. Yes, and so I think that a lot of those things that you just called a reconstruction, I've actually stopped using this word, and I use the word reappearance. Because when I started this project in 2006, I was calling them reconstructions, and then all of a sudden there started to be a kind of real frenzy in 2011 after the Syrian civil war had begun. To reconstruct or to prepare to reconstruct those things that were going to be lost. And it was almost like there was a preemptive idea that these things could be destroyed, and therefore we need to save all of the data so that these things can be remade. But when I think about the fact that, you know, you can maybe 3D print the temple of Baal, you know, from Palmyra, you can't 3D print the DNA of the people who perish alongside those archaeological artifacts. So all of those works that I've done are kind of like these ghosts that come back to haunt. And a scar can be like a ghost. It tells a story. It's unflinching. You know, it's fearless. You know, and in a way, for me, it's like the geological cataclysms that happen in the world. You know, thousands and thousands, millions of years ago, right? And geology will never hide its scars. And so that's what I demand of my work.
There's a beautiful aspect that come out from your video, the Ballad of Special Ops Cody, which has to do with forgiveness. At a certain point, the doll apologized to the object in the vitrine. How important is to ask forgiveness? And another aspect that comes out of your work that run through all your practice is generosity. So how these two aspects for you are important in the art practice, but also in the world from the artistic perspective, I'm saying.
Well, I mean, as a Jew, we have an entire holiday based around forgiveness, and maybe a better word for that is atonement, because you know, if we think about the holiday of Yom Kippur, which we call the Day of Atonement, it's not just about asking for forgiveness. It's also about taking stock of the work that needs to be done for that forgiveness to be something that's sustainable. It's very easy for apology to happen. An apology is sometimes too easy because it unburdens the person saying it more than the person who you're saying it to. And so there needs to be a kind of, you know, something that is restorative, that you return to time and time again, and a repair work. And so in the video, I'm not the one asking for forgiveness, it's actually the veteran who is doing the voiceover for Special Ops Cody, that she's asking for forgiveness. And forgiveness is not something that I can give her, and it's not something that I can expect from the Iraqi people who suffered when American soldiers went to war there. And so she's asking it through Special Ops Cody, so it's a doll from 2005 AD that's speaking to another doll, a votive sculpture from 2005 BC, and asking for something, for forgiveness, saying, I'm sorry, but there's no answer. There's no acknowledgement. And so it leaves at that point. And in terms of generosity, I think that in a way, this is about creating a situation where people can come into something. You know, hospitality was always very important in my house growing up, and it's very much a part of Iraqi culture, Palestinian culture, Syrian culture. I mean, it's just, it's ingrained in so many different ways. And so, you know, this idea of what it means to open up a space where things might be able to happen, you know, for me, it's a way of strengthening a kind of open system that can happen in art, and I've been very influenced by that in art history.
Thank you, Michael, so much. I think we try also to open up a space through this exhibition on this subject that somehow has not often an answer, but in any case, open up a space of discussion. So thank you again, Michael, for being here.